Hi there, welcome to the Schwowin's Nest. My name is Sandra, and I'm so glad you're here.
To start off this first project, I'm going to be printing a design on tissue paper. I just use dollar store tissue paper, but I always make sure that the shiny side is facing down when I tape it onto a piece of printer paper. Now, some of you have mentioned that your printer paper gets stuck or it gets shredded because of the tissue paper on it. You could also try a piece of cardstock, which would be a little bit thicker. The other thing you could try is using some masking tape, which I find tends to help because it does make the paper itself a little bit thicker and a little bit easier for the printer to grab. On the sides of the tissue paper, I like to take the tape and fold it over like this. So it's got to be folded onto the back of the paper, and that just makes it even more secure. This is the design I'm going to use, and I have a link for it down in my description box. This is a little mini teapot that I'm going to use for this project. And to get rid of the shiny surface, I'm going to give it a really good coat of Rust-Oleum clear matte finish. Once that dries, I'm going to use the color Sheepskin by Faux. This is a chalk paint, and I'm going to give everything a couple of really good coats, letting it dry really well in between. Another problem that some of you have asked me about is your inkjet printer running when you're printing it on the tissue paper. When you apply the Mod Podge, then it tends to run. What you can do is also use that same Rust-Oleum clear matte finish, give it a couple of sprays, let it dry for at least an hour, and then try it one more time. Most of the time, that Rust-Oleum will seal in the ink and then you won't have any bleeding at all. I'm going to apply the tissue paper using Mod Podge, a thin amount just where I want the tissue paper to be, and then I'm going to place it on top. I cut this pattern into a diamond shape, and I'm just going to be putting 2 of those pieces on either side of the teapot. I'm not going to worry about the spout or the handle right now. Use a very light touch when you're pressing down with your paintbrush on top of the tissue paper. You don't want it to tear. I wanted this teapot to have a little bit of a French country look, so I did look online to see if I could find any inspiration, and this is what I came up with. I loved how the handle and the lid were painted a little differently, so I'm going to paint the knob and the handle and the spout and the bottom rim of my little teapot with this beautiful eucalyptus green color. I did a couple of coats of the green and made sure I got inside the spout. Once it was completely dry, I just sprayed it with a glossy finish sealer, and I think this turned out absolutely beautiful. I just love the pattern of it, and I hope you love it too.
If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet and you like what you see, I would love it if you could hit that red button.
For this next project, I decided to make a wreath using this wreath form. I had used it for a different project earlier on, and I'm just pulling out all of the greenery. That's why I love these grapevine wreaths. You don't have to actually glue anything in if you don't want to. I wanted to make a beautiful spring wreath, and this is my inspiration. It's a little bunny wreath that came from the Pottery Barn website. I'm not going to put the ears on mine, but I am going to be using the creamy whites and the pinks and a lot of the soft green florals for this project. I'm going to start out by putting the white rose in the center, and then I'm going to flank it with 2 of the pink ones, and then those are going to be flanked with 2 of the creamy ones again. And that's just going to start creating the base of the wreath. This time I do want these flowers to be permanent, so I'm using some hot glue on the bottom of each of the stems and then pushing it into the grapevine wreath so it's really secure. I'm also going to be using some of this greenery that I got from Michael's. I really love the frosted look of them. They're sort of like a lamb's ear. They're kind of dusty, I guess you would call them. And I just love that kind of a look. It just softens up the green. I love green and bright green for the summer, but for spring, I really love these softer colors. Next, I took this smaller rosebud and put that a little ways up on the wreath, and I'm going to make a little arrangement right here, and then I'll duplicate it on the other side. I'm going to use some of the same greenery. I'm going to use some cherry blossoms that you can see there on the really large rose. I've added some there, and I've also got a little bit of dogwood and some hydrangea blossoms that I'm going to create sort of a little arrangement within an arrangement. So here I have some pink petals that were used in a different project that I kept and saved because I'm a crafter. I save everything. And I'm going to use a little bit of hot glue and just pinch it together and then add additional petals. So this looks like a little rosebud as well. And this turns out really pretty. And this is the reason why I pulled out the white ones, because I thought they were just a little too thick, in my opinion. These turned out really soft and delicate, and they just looked so much better. All you do is just pinch them and then layer them together so they're not all in the same spot. I'm going to continue to fill up the wreath. I'm going to do it a little bit more sparse as I reach towards the top of the wreath. I don't want it to be hugely full like the inspiration, but I do want it to be really soft and delicate and romantic. I really love how this one turned out, and I hope you like it too. I'm starting off this project with two of these wood planks from the Dollar Tree and one of these larger signs. I made a mark where I want to cut it, so it's just about a half an inch longer on each side, and I'm just going to use my miter box to create those. Then, using another one of the planks, I cut down two half-inch strips that you can see here. And this wood is really easy to cut down. I just used my box cutter. Now I'm using wood glue to apply everything and add it all together. What I wanted to do was just create sort of a little slotted piece of wood that has a hole in the center, but not a really big hole. You'll see what I mean here in a second. I'm going to use some clamps to clamp everything together and let it dry for a good half an hour. I'm going to use wood glue then to glue the two pieces together. I'm going to give this two really good coats of white chalk paint. This is the Bear brand. I've got just a little bit left at the bottom of the container, so I'm going to use it up. I'm going to paint a grain sack stripe in the center of this sign. So I'm using this piece of masking tape as my spacer. I'm going to use one that's a little bit longer, and I'm going to make sure that it's nice and straight and that I've got it securely taped down. Then I'll put another piece underneath my spacer piece and then pull that piece off. I decided to fold the masking tape down over the sides and then paint that area as well. The color that I'm using is a little bit lighter than for the teapot. It's still sort of a sage green, but this was a color from Martha Stewart that I really didn't like. So I added some darker green and some gray and came up with this beautiful light sage color. I'm going to be applying it fairly thickly, but not too thick. I want to be able to see a little bit of the brush stroke and a little bit of that white paint peeking through. You don't have to wait for the paint to dry for this step. I am going to use my blow dryer just to give it a little bit of a heat source so it can dry a little bit quicker. Look at how beautiful that looks, although I did have a little bit of a schmutz there. The next piece of tape is going to cover up the white space in between the green sack stripe. So I'm going to go ahead and place that down, and then I'll place another piece of tape about 1/4 of an inch in space away from the first piece of tape here. And that will give me my line for the thin green sack stripe. And I'll repeat this process on the other side. I'll paint the stripes green again, making sure that I have full coverage, but not having that much coverage that you don't see a little bit of that white texture coming through. And again, I'm just going to go around the sides too. I have a clear stamp that is a swallow, which is a type of bird. I think it's a swallow anyway. It looks like one. I'm going to just put some ink on it. This is black ink and it's just from the dollar store. You can use basically whatever you like when you're doing your own projects. And I'm going to make sure that it's inked up really well. And then I'm going to place it right in the center of this piece. I'm not really sure what to call it, if it's a vase or a wood sculpture. You'll have to help me out with what you think it should be called. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put the bird down and holding it really nice and steady with one hand, then just pressing it down, making sure that all of the areas come into contact with this piece. To give this more of an old and vintage look, I'm taking my chip brush with a little bit of black paint and just very lightly distressing all over the piece. I'm going to go along the back as well as a little bit on the front. I'm repurposing this candlestick that I had used in the fall with a pumpkin on it. I'm going to take this saucer from a teacup set and glue that right on top of the little rim here. What I'm using is some Weld Bond glue, and I will add a little bit of hot glue as well to hold it in place while I'm working with it. Once the hot glue had set up, I flipped it over and added a little bit more hot glue just to make sure that it was really secure. I'm going to glue the teacup onto the saucer, so I'm using the same Weld Bond and hot glue combination to make sure that it stays put. Sorry that you can't see me actually putting the teacup onto the saucer, but you probably can figure it out. This candlestick is already painted white, but I'm going to go ahead and give it another fresh coat of white chalk paint. I have two different types of IOD trim molds. I'm not sure what this one is called, but I'm just going to be taking some of the IOD clay, and I like to roll it out into a sausage like this so I can get it the right size for the mold. Then I just gently push it right into the mold, and because these have that little micro rim, then I can just start taking off any of the excess mold. And I just do that with my thumb. I start at one end and I just start kind of pushing it and getting that micro rim to appear. I dusted the mold before I started with a little bit of cornstarch, and then I like to flip the mold over and just kind of peel it back so the clay just falls right onto my workstation. And I have just found that that's the easiest way to get the molds out. If there's any cleanup that needs to be done, you can use an X-Acto knife, but I just tend to use my fingernails and my fingers to just smooth down all of the edges. I did 2 of these, and now I'm just going to turn the first one over, and using the same Weld Bond glue, I like to apply it with my finger just because then I know I'm going to get it everywhere. You could use a paintbrush if you wanted to as well. Then once I've got the whole thing covered, I'm going to apply it right underneath the saucer because you can see the glue and the different areas of where things were all attached together. And putting this piece of clay on here is going to camouflage that. And it turns out really pretty. I've just got it pushed right up against the saucer, and then I'm very gently with my fingers pushing against it so the glue makes good contact with the rest of the piece. I measured out another shorter piece, added glue, and then filled in the area. My apologies for the camera here. It's focusing on the bottom of the candlestick instead of what I'm doing, but I think you can get the idea. I also added a larger trim piece on the bottom of the candlestick, and this just made that regular 2x4 look that much nicer. I'm using a tissue paper transfer again, and this is just something that I found on Pixabay. I did find that this color with the blue was running just a little wee bit. So next time I'm going to make sure I let it dry a little bit more and also spray it with some clear matte sealer, which will prevent it from running. I'm just very gently going over it with the Mod Podge, and I'm going to do one circle around the corner this way, and then I'll do another one on the other side a little farther up. I think this piece would look amazing with just a candle in it, or some artificial flowers, or even a real potted plant. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to know what you would like to see next. Drop me a line in the comments. Thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. That gets me noticed more on YouTube and helps my channel grow. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and the notification bell too. That will let you know every time I have something to share.